Hello and welcome once again to my podcast that's full of TV nostalgia. It's Jack's Throwback Attack. Yes, I am back after a long break. It's good to be back. If you're new to my podcast, basically, I chat with people that were involved in the iconic TV shows that I grew up with and find out about their stories and lots of interesting behind-the-scenes stuff. So if your childhood spans the 80s, 90s or noughties, then this is the podcast for you, and there's plenty of old editions to look back on. This time around, I have only recorded a small bunch of interviews to release, but they are excellent, and we start off this series with one that will be enjoyed by anyone who's a big fan of Sooty, and especially if their favourite character is Sue the panda. Enjoy. So it brings me great pleasure today to be speaking to the person who has been the voice of Sue from the Sooty Show for many, many years. It's Brenda Longman. Hello, how are you?
Hello, Jack. I'm very well. I'm sitting in my lovely garden. I hope there's not too many extraneous noises going to go on with traffic and aircraft and neighbours.
Yes, certainly. Well, we are recording because this will go out a little bit later on in the year. We're actually recording this in June, and it's one of the hottest days of the year. But you're in your garden, I'm in an air-conditioned studio, so it's not too bad.
That's all right.
Absolutely. So we're going to talk about your career and especially with a focus on the Sooty Show. But what I want to know is before Sooty came about in your life, what were you doing? What was your background in entertainment and stuff like that?
Well, my background was in classical singing. I trained as an opera singer from school. It wasn't my intention. It was because I thought it was just because I was lazy, basically. And I went to the headmaster when I was about 13 because I played the guitar, and I said, please, can I have guitar evening classes? And he said, why? And I said, well, I want to accompany myself singing. So he said, well, no, I'm afraid not. It's going to interfere with your homework. But if you think you can sing, we'll get somebody down from the county to hear you. And which is what they did. And I got what was called a junior exhibition, which was a grant. And I was granted a singing teacher and a piano teacher for the whole of my secondary years at school. And I thought I was going to be a teacher, but I was doing sort of cabaret and folk clubs with my brother singing. And they said, no, you're going to train. We've spent all this money on you. I'm afraid you're going to train as an opera singer. And I thought, sounds all right to me, because didn't sound a lot like hard work, which I was going to teach either English or history, which is a lot more academic, a lot more hard work. But of course, being an opera singer is much, much more like hard work. It's like being an athlete. So anyway, I went to a lovely place in Winchester, which was Winchester School of Art, and it was a new music department, and I trained for 2 years there. And then I went to the Royal Academy of Music for another 3 years. So I was very old when I actually left. I was offered a part at Glyndebourne in the chorus, and I turned it down because I didn't want to be in the chorus. And so I taught singing because that was part of my course. And my brother and I were singing together, and we then went on to Opportunity Knocks in 1974. And I think, in a way, that was really linked to me doing Sue, actually, because a lot of the Thames people there knew of me before Matt asked me to do the voice of Sue, as indeed with Rod, Jane and Freddie. They were Opportunity Knocks babies as well. So that happened. But before I was asked to be Sue, I went to our local rep theatre and worked in theatre administration. And then I was flung onto the stage and played my very first theatre role was as Nancy in Oliver. That was my debut in the theatre, if you like, because I'd only been singing up to that point. So I was very lucky.
Nice. That sounds like a very interesting start. How did you become the voice of Sue following being on Opportunity
Well,
Knocks?
Yes, it was at this particular theatre, the Redgrave Theatre, in Farnham, which is now, I still campaign for a theatre in Farnham to be replaced. And I am currently the artistic director of the Farnham Rep Company, which we try and put on productions when we can. I'm digressing a bit there, but it's a bit of an advert for the Farnham Rep. It was a brilliant theatre. It was one of the best in the country, and it was an absolute sacrilege that it was flattened. But basically, it was the Arts Council didn't want to fund it anymore. The way that it was set up, it couldn't function because it wasn't subsidised enough. So even if they'd sold every ticket every night, it still would have made a loss. So it was basically a bit of a problem. Anyway, I was there as in the theatre administration, and I ran. The manager said to me, "Let's go and see Sooty at Aldershot," because I was a theatre manager at Bristol when Matthew Corbett was there. And I know Matthew, we're going to see whether it's a suitable show to have at this theatre. So off we went, and we met Matthew, and Matthew said, "I know you, I've seen you on Opportunity Knocks with your brother," which is really weird because it wasn't long before then. And we got chatting, and we got very friendly, and he asked my brother and I over to supper, and mainly it was just to jam, to play guitars and write songs and things like that. He was actually on Rainbow, I think, at that point anyway. He wasn't. No, he'd left Rainbow, hadn't he? And a few years later, I ran a charity, Give Us a Clue, which is charades basically, and a Call My Bluff evening for a lot of celebrities. And I thought, oh, I know what'll be a laugh. I'll ask Matthew Corbett if he'll dress up as Sooty and be the chairman, because he had this life-size costume. Anyway, he didn't. He brought somebody with him in the costume, but he was the chairman with Sooty, and it was really successful. It was very, very good. That night, he said to me, "My mother is going to have to leave as the voice of Sue because she can't watch the monitor and she can't read the script and smoke a fag at the same time because they think she's a fire risk in the studio." He said, "Well, I find her a fire risk as well." He said, "And to be quite honest, it's time Sue's voice changed. Would you be willing to come and audition?" So, of course, I said yes. The rest is history, really. But I think it was also to do with the fact that Charles Warren, who was head of children's television, knew that because when you do Opportunity Knocks, you were given 3 television performances. And so we'd done another thing called Jimmy Young's Lunchbox. And also I was sort of hanging around on a Benny Hill show as well. So they kind of knew of me. Whereas the other 2 people who auditioned, I don't think had any track record, if you like. Yeah. It was pretty much a done deal, actually, because Matt wanted me to do it. And that was it. That was 1981.
Cool. So a very, very long time.
A very long time before you were even a twinkle.
Correct. That's a great story, though. So when you were chosen to be the voice of Sue, how did you come up with the voice? Or did you just do a voice and it was like, okay, that'll do? Or was there actually a thought behind it?
I did a voice, which was really, I just, everybody loves pandas. And I think I tried to make it as sweet as possible to start with. But then, of course, little did I know, she's gone back actually more to that voice now because it's because the show's aimed at younger people. But Matt really wanted, he was really all for women's lib, and in fact sometimes she's really quite strident when she's putting the world to rights. So it started as soft and sweet, and then it got quite strident. I remember lovely Michael Aspel saying to me, "Oh my God, your voice wakes me up every bloody morning. I said, oh, it's quite penetrating, isn't it? And he said, yes. I said, that's because I was an opera singer and is trained to cut across an auditorium of an opera house. So he said, yeah, that's what it sounds like. But yeah, that's really how I came up with it. It's my own voice, but it's obviously much higher. But I did try and make it soft and sweet. And but it wasn't always soft and sweet. When she got a bit growly, she got a bit pandery growly. And a bit like Miss Piggy, I suppose. But then I was pre-Miss Piggy, so you can't say who's copying who.
Very true. It's funny you mention that because I just think of all the. You say, like, obviously started out, a lot more sweeter. I kind of think by the Sooty and Co era, she was a lot more sarcastic, and just remember the scream that Sue would do. I mean, now you mention that you trained in opera, it all makes sense.
It does, doesn't it? You can hear the tones coming in, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was Matt. He just loved writing sort of ridiculous storylines for her. In that she was the only other one that spoke, so she had to have a full range, of course, because some of the stuff he wrote was really sophisticated for her. So it couldn't be this rather soft, breathy voice that started off as a kind of young Joanna Lumley. It got quite strident at times, exactly. And that, I think, made it funny.
Yes, it really did. It really did. So am I right in thinking, correct me if I'm wrong, but so you did the voice of Sue, you've never been the puppeteer, is that right?
I no, that isn't quite right,
Okay.
because I have done the puppeteering from time to time, and
Right.
did a little to start with. As the dialogue grew, as Matthew realized the more stuff he gave the puppets to do, the less dialogue he had to learn within the storyline. It was absolutely impossible to do reams of dialogue on a script and do that with any kind of conviction. If you're looking down at the script, you can't be looking at the monitor as to where the puppet is, so it could be going all over the place. So it wasn't on. So I think by the second year or something, I'd stopped puppeteering. But then, in certain shots and things, I would be on location. It would be me, because there'll be the only one available for a hand,
Yeah.
at some point, if you needed an extra hand, in other words. Yeah.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. That clears up that mystery for me. I wasn't too sure on that one. Do
And of course,
you?
I do all the puppeteering on my little messages that I send to people.
Oh yes, yes, I have seen that. We'll talk about that a bit later on. The one thing I do want to know. So, am I right in thinking? So I have seen a few behind the scenes clips on YouTube. Usually, it's done as live, isn't it? You're just off the camera doing it as
Yeah.
live. It's
Yeah.
not recorded.
No.
Ah, cool.
No.
Um, unless it's the live shows, I imagine. Is
The
that
stage
recorded?
shows, yeah, the stage shows are done, and there are over 200 tape stops on those, and so Matt has to slip of the tongue. Richard has to learn, you know, where to come in, and I think it's incredible that he does that. Well, Matt did as well, of course, but um, yeah, that's all done in a recording studio. Sometimes, of course, if you're filming an episode, and most of the stuff with Richard has been out on location, and an episode overruns, you've got to go and do post AD. So then it's done in a studio, because if it's running too long, then you've got to change the dialogue and speak. Unfortunately, with this puppet, there's no lip sync, so that is done in a studio. But with Matt, we had the interiors and we had the location work. So the locations were all shot before we did any interiors, and we're talking of 13, what were the 25-minute episodes each year. And so you would do each episode had an outside location. And you do all that as live. So you found yourself lying in a ditch, or you found yourself lying in the back of a car on the floor, or you found yourself on on a big dipper going the wrong way round on a fairground, or you found yourself with a killer whale at Windsor Great Park in the water. So, or back of a motorbike, all very, very exciting. It wouldn't happen nowadays. Health and safety would have had a field day, but they were wonderful times. That was at Thames.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, cool stuff.
So, but when we went up to Granada, yeah, well, we did all episodes on location. For example, we went to Spain for the whole week. It was Mo's villa. Being the con artist that she was so rich. She'd conned everybody out so much money. She actually had a villa, but she did let them go and stay there for nothing, that episode. So we did that in Spain, and then we went to Scotland, and then we went to Ireland so Sooty could kiss the Blarney Stone and get the gift of the gab, because he'd never spoken before. And of course we went to the Pyrenees with Father Christmas. So they were great jollies, really.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous thinking of a sort of a huge crew going for something, 2-3 things about that size. But people would fight to be on the crew.
Yeah, I can imagine. All those episodes you've mentioned, I remember very well. They are all good episodes, and it is mad when you think about it that, like, not just with Sooty, there's other programs I can think of. Some of them puppetry based, some of them not, where they'd fly an entire crew out just to do a program in a far-flung location for a kids show on CITV. It's like the budgets were there back then, but not anymore, which is very sad.
Not anymore. It is sad. I remember, and that was, I well remember, my first year, 1981, doing the outside locations. And I just couldn't get my head around it, because we were shooting in and around Teddington quite a lot. But I counted up, being very green, 38 people in Teddington High Street to do with this shoot, all to shoot Sweep's legs going along the road. That's all it was. And there were 38 people. And I couldn't quite hack that. I didn't really understand, but it was just in case you needed a prop, or in case you need this or that. But those were the days.
Yeah, yeah. Very crazy, the amount of effort they put into it, but at the same time, very, very cool that they did, when they
Yes.
made the effort, because it shows, and people still love it.
Yeah. And also, just digressing from Sooty for a minute, I did Teabag, and those shows you rehearse for a week. It was like a little play, and you actually rehearse for a week when you would never do that. You can't do that with soaps or anything nowadays. But the standard was incredibly high because of that, and it was great, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, there's other shows I can think of from around that time that did the same, and it's mad when you think about it and how much it's changed. But there we go. We've still got the memories, and the footage is still, readily available to watch online, and DVDs and all of that. So at least there's that, really. The one thing I did want to ask, actually, just a random thing that just come into my head, is that the Thames series was set in a house, and the interiors were all filmed at Teddington, but there was this lovely cottage that they lived in. I mean, where was that? This big house that they lived in.
I think it was near Chessington, that cottage. Yeah. It was, yeah. That's the joy and the fakery of television. You'd actually, you'd have to shoot me if I told you where that is. I don't know. I never asked. I wish I had asked, really. We used to shoot on a farm at Chessington quite a lot. If there were ever animals involved. Do you remember? I don't know if you remember. Just trying to think how old you are. Do you remember Sweep in a Tug of War with Jeff Capes, who was out?
I'll tell you why I know that episode.
Do you remember that?
It's not that I remember it. I'll tell you why I know it. When CITV turned 30 in 2013, they did a whole weekend of showing their old shows. And they showed one Sooty Show and one Sooty and Co. And the Sooty Show episode that they showed was that episode.
Yeah,
so I
right.
watched it.
Yeah. Oh, that was quite interesting because I think Sue was cheering for Jeff Capes rather than Sweet. But that's when I got butted by a goat quite badly, um, which was hilarious, I have to say. So I always tell that story as being unfortunate because it was cold and I got a white wool coat on. It must have thought I was another goat, I think. But anyway, that was at Chessington. So we used to go out to Chessington quite a bit and also film at Chessington World of Adventures as well.
Oh,
So not always Thames, not always Cheddington rather. Um, but yeah,
not too far away. The one thing that was cool about Sooty is that, you know, they did build these fantastic props and these little miniatures, and they really did think about how can we make this work for puppets and stuff like that, and how do we make the magic work and stuff like that, which is, you know, incredible, really. And they're still doing that now, which is nice.
yeah. Apart from the flower press, which was always on, it'll be all right on the night.
Yes, I have seen that.
Tried
That
to put
is
a
a
wing
great
nut
clip.
on. Get a puppet to put a wing nut on. Um, it was very funny, but nothing like the props that Harry had. Harry's props are phenomenal when you go right the way back. And you've got a real working lathe. I mean, really dangerous. And real little fat fryers in a fish and chip shop. I mean, incredible. But then he had his best friend was an engineer, and I cannot remember the name, and I should, of the man that made all these things and invented them. And he was a genius, really. He was like the the fourth or fifth person who should have been credited to Sooty because they dreamed up all these things. Harry would, and he'd build them. This guy, and they were extraordinary. And um, but again, we health and safety wouldn't be allowed to do that today, I'm
No,
afraid.
maybe for the best with some of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, with explosions going off, and like you say, deep fat fryers. I mean, wow. Okay. No, thanks. No, that's cool. It's cool to find. It's fun. I totally forgot about that. All right, on the night clip, actually. Now you've mentioned it. Yes, I have seen that because I love the little ad lib that you do. What is it? Bloody Auntie Brenda, she always was trouble. I seem to remember as
That's
the
it.
line.
Yes, yeah, I get a name check as well.
So obviously, Thames lost its franchise in the early 90s, and Sooty moved up to Manchester and was made by Granada for ITV, and it becomes Sooty and Co, set in a junk shop. Now, the one interesting thing about that is that you were given a second role on screen as Mo from the Market. Now, how did that character come about?
I think that I'd done sort of several humans in the past, just as guest artists. I was somebody, Pongo Products, I seem to remember, and then I was a studio cleaner as something else. Uh, and Matthew was slightly obsessed with Vera Duckworth. And because it was a whole new look, because uh, it really fired his imagination that this junk shop was going to be the featured set, and that was they were going to be running it, and it really fired him up. And he thought, oh, it would be quite a nice idea if somebody who is a little bit dodgy from the junk trade is a regular character. And so he talked to me about it and said, I've written you this part. And I wasn't in every episode, but my God, it was fun. It was such fun. And she was such fun. And sometimes I used to weep with laughter at the script. I hope I did it justice, but it was very funny what he wrote. Very, very funny. Um, what's weird, and I don't know, correct me if I mentioned this, but I was saying this the other day. I did an episode as Mo decided to stand for the local council,
Yes.
and we were crying with laughter because it was all about potholes. And Mo was going around with a megaphone going, say no to holes. Say... And the stupid thing is now, everybody would vote for a government who would get rid of potholes, including me, because I had a blowout last week driving back from Richmond. I went into a pothole and the whole tyre shredded.
Gosh.
And it's come about. But so her ridiculous sort of manifesto based on potholes has come true, really. It's
Yeah.
prophetic.
Yeah. That is very true. Yeah, I remember that episode. I think it's you and Connie Crichton's the other one,
I
isn't
had a
she?
fight with Connie, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have
Yeah,
seen
we were
that episode.
chucking stuff at each other. It was lovely. It's lovely having Connie there. And I used to wear Liz Dawn's old wigs, Vera Duckworth's old wigs in Granada, and we're exactly the same height. And she'd be going out of makeup one door, and she'd do a double take as I'd be coming in the other way with one of her wigs. It's like, um, but yeah,
No, it's cool. I remember the character very well.
he must have known uh, women like that. I would imagine, Matt, to
Um,
base it on it. He might have had, from I don't know, but yeah, he must do. He must have had perhaps an aunt, or I know he said that to me, or his aunt's friend, or his mum's friend was like that. So that's
yeah.
probably how.
No, that's fair enough, and she was a very memorable character. And I have to say, I mean, I don't know whether it's biased because it's what I grew up watching, and I remember renting the videos out from the library constantly. But I think Sooty and Co. Was definitely, I don't want to say the best, but certainly up there
So
as
many people say that.
yeah,
So many people, and I do truly believe it. I, I mean, obviously, I have to be grateful and thankful to Darling Richard for reviving everything. But the point is, he is completely restricted by, and it's all boils down to money, by the age group that he has to, it has to fall into when it's on the television, which is, a much younger age group. He
yeah, of
wasn't
course.
allowed to have it as it was a family show, and the family shows, which is what we were talking about earlier, have gone where everybody sat down to watch it. They don't exist anymore, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There was because it had like an entire 20-minute storyline and just ridiculous slapstick, and with it being a family show, there were some jokes in there that perhaps, well, certainly went over my head at the time, but now I understand.
Yeah,
When-
of course, because there was always something in there for the mums and dads, wasn't there?
yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I've always wondered about the character of Mo, that's always that confused me slightly, and I remember bringing this up with you when we were in Nottingham, but I'll bring it up again now. Is that, like you say, it was like a Vera Duckworth style character, and she had the short blonde wig, but then later on, she went a bit Dolly Parton. The wig got
She
a lot
went
bigger,
very, yes,
and there
she
was like
did. She
tassels
went
and
very country and western.
hmm,
She did. Um, that was my choice. I did say, um, because I don't know, that short wig, and in fact, so did Vera. But the wig was really, it had got so much stuff chucked at it that that we had to get a new wig, and yeah, and that was me. I'm afraid that was my vanity. I thought, no, let's make her a bit country and western this time. So it was just like she'd grown her hair, really. But she was a bit more glam, wasn't she, really?
yeah, I remember, and I think the
I
accent
think
changed slightly as well. Seem to remember
it
a little bit.
probably did. It kept going from one side of the Pennines to the other.
Well, I remember when I met you, I said, "Oh, I think it sounds West Country," and you said, "No, it's supposed to be Lancashire," and I'm like, "Oh, got that totally wrong."
Yes, you've got Lancashire R. In some
Hmm.
parts of Lancashire, you've got
Yeah,
that sort of er,
I suppose you
Bobby
could see why I'd
Dazzler.
confuse it
Bobby
as some.
Dazzler. Actually, somebody said, and I think I said this to you in Nottingham, that a lot of accents are this. It sounds ridiculous and simplistic, but a lot of accents are the same. Bastardized RP, they are the same with R's. Like American and Irish and things like that. They are very similar sounds
Yeah,
in accents.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whereas we, whereas where I'm from, R is a way of saying yes. We go, oh yes,
Ah,
yeah, all the time in the Black Country, which is where I am at the moment. Mentioning Vera Duckworth, in the early days of Sooty and Co, the front of the shop was right next to Coronation Street, wasn't it? I know it moved to an actual street later on, which
it
somebody
did.
found not long ago. I think it's a pet shop now, So-
Oh
or a dog
yeah,
grooming shop.
it was in a really dodgy area, actually. Um, yeah, it really was because um, where we were before, I think there was that wonderful episode where Sweet left home and he's got the big tissue, not the big issue, and he's under a bridge. He's under. Do you remember that?
I
And
think so,
Mo
yeah.
goes to rescue him. That was when we were on the street virtually, and also we could pop in. We used to pop in when they were shooting Corrie and pop up from behind the bar quite often. Um, but yes, we went to this really rather dodgy area. Uh, yeah, I can't remember what it had been before we got there, but if it's a pet shop now, that's
think it's a
all
dog. I
very.
think it's a dog grooming shop. Now I think about it, actually,
Oh, is it dog grooming?
somebody found it and they did like a comparison where they lined it up with a shot of the Sooty and Co shop. So yeah, and it does mention where I have actually looked it up on Google Maps. I forget where. I know it's somewhere near Manchester, but I can't remember. Somebody will be
Yeah,
shouting it now at me now as I say this. But yeah,
yeah. It's sort of near a Heaton Park, I think, where we used to do quite
mm.
a lot of stuff as well. It was
Oh
nearer there.
yes, yeah, because Heaton Park, yeah, because there's that one where Matthew does the bungee jump. I remember that one.
He certainly did. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gosh, no, thank you. He's a very brave man for doing that.
Right.
Mad. It's mad what they did. But with Sooty and Co as well, I suppose we've got to mention like probably one of the more famous episodes that people still talk about to this day. There's an episode where they all learn about where babies come from. And there's a few gags in there, like Sweep doesn't know where they come from, and Matthew's very awkward about it. And Sue plays this trick on Matthew where she pretends to be pregnant by stuffing toys up her dress and says a few rather funny lines. That caused quite a stir at the time, didn't it? I mean, what were your thoughts? Was it crazy that this kids show was causing such a stir in the press?
Yeah, I thought it was a bit. I thought there was a lot of overreaction to that, really, because I always say this that Matthew had two boys and a girl, and whatever they did, it gave him uh, ideas for what he could put into his episodes. And I understand that Tamsin, Matt's daughter, came home from school and said that her friend's mummy had this big tummy and everything. And Sally explained that she was having a baby, and Tamsin stuffed a cushion up her. So it was absolutely what his daughter had done. And I don't know, because Matthew hadn't had a daughter before, he must have thought, oh, well, that perhaps Sue would do that as well. Um, so that's where it all came from. But I think it wasn't quite so much that as one of the lines about the Manchester football team. And I wish I could remember what the actual line was, but she said something like, oh, I've had the whole team up here, or something like, oh, it looks like you've had the whole team up there. That was the problem, I
Yeah.
think. I can't remember. Oh, gosh, we need to
I,
go back and look at it.
I think it was something along the lines of, I feel like I've got the entire Manchester football
I
team
feel like
inside me. I
that's
think
it.
was a line. I
That
think,
was
yeah.
it.
We, yes, which went straight over, the kids' heads, but yeah, was a bit
He must
naughty.
have But Matt was terrible. He was terrible. Because he did used to try and get away, see what he could get away with, and he was
Yes,
told, if you say, if we get away with that, go and see them about that, they'll let that bit through, and it was that bit that he really wanted, but he'd go and see them about the other bit, and they'd
yeah,
say, well, we'll think about it. Yes, yes, you can do that, and then of course he would, but it was terrible when you think about it. And then the other thing with a big fuss about it was that lovely episode with them. the sniffing of the essential oils.
I'm trying to remember that
We
one now.
Oh well, we got into a lot of trouble with that. It was Lovely John Bird. Perhaps that's why the
Oh,
pigeon.
yes, I know now. Yes.
And yeah, the puppets were sniffing, and Sweet went berserk. So it was, tantamount to sort of snorting
Mm.
coke or something. And they got very sniffy about it. They got very upset about that.
Yeah. No,
I
that's fair
think
enough.
that I think that was pulled, that episode, in the end, or it wasn't allowed to be shown, or when the series was sold on, they dropped that particular episode.
It's definitely on YouTube. I know that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it must have been in I don't know, when it went out to New Zealand or something.
Yeah, yeah. No, there are lots of little gags I can think of that were quite funny. I mean, with Matthew, there were like little in jokes about. I mean, one that always cracks me up is there's one where Sooty brings a xylophone out, and he says, "What are you going to play for us?" And Sooty whispers in his ear, and he goes, "Rachmaninoff's Prelude in D minor." And he looks at him confused, and he goes, "I didn't know I could do that. I mean, I didn't know you could do that." I love little gags like that.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yeah. But it's funny when you ask me about what did I think about that. There were so many other things going on, and if I sit and watch it, there were so many in jokes that Matt and I had, and bits of dialogue that I added to make him laugh that he wasn't in the script as well. Uh, um, it was full on, really, the fun. It really was.
yeah,
There's one there was an episode about an AUG, AUGR, which was a out what's it rhythm or algorithm thing. And we tried to get the word or the noise algr into everything that we said. And there's one ridiculous episode where I can't remember now what we said, but are you going algr? I don't know. But anyway, that was one episode. And then another one was we both love John Shuttleworth. Um, and Richard loves John Shuttleworth. That's Graham Fellows, the guy who does Shuttleworths on
yeah,
Radio 4.
yeah.
And he goes, "Oof," quite a lot. Well, there's one episode of Sooty where everything, before anybody ever spoke, we just oof, oof, quiet ones, loud ones. And nobody ever said anything about it. It's a bit naughty, isn't it?
It's funny though.
It is funny. It is
It is
funny.
good.
Well, it made us laugh.
Yeah, and it's a good story.
I'd
No, I love
forgotten
it.
that. Oh God, you'll get all of the secrets now.
No, that's fair enough. I mean, I could happily talk about Sooty and Co and all that for hours, but I will move on to a bit later on. Sooty and Co was the last series that Matthew did, and he decided to retire. Of course, there was that great scene that they did at the very end where they put him in that big box, which looked like a birthday cake full of gunge. That was his last scene. I did actually recently see a photo. I was at an event in Derby, where they were playing this documentary. The one that I forget his name now, Jeff is making. I forget his name now.
Just smart.
Jeff Smart, that's it, thank you. And I watched that, and then at the end, he had this framed picture, which was from that final day, and it said something like Matthew's last scene of Sooty and Co. I think it was July 1998, I think it said. Do you remember that final day? It must have been quite a memorable but
I
emotional day.
do. What I remember most about it was Jerry Marsden, though. That was the final day, wasn't it? Um, that's what I remember. Because Matt and Jerry, of course, had their own show on Thames Television years before, and they were terrible together. They used to wind each other up. They were very, very naughty boys. And that's what I found moving, really. Like, because I didn't really believe Matt was going. I couldn't quite grasp it. Would never. I just thought, no, it's not going to happen. No, no, he'll be back. He'll be back. Um, that was the first thing. So I didn't give into it, historically. Oh my goodness, this is his last day, because it was like losing my brother, really. Because that's how close we are. Um, I just didn't think it. I couldn't quite process it. But what was amazing to me on that last day, completely personal, was watching Jerry singing. What did he sing? He didn't sing "You'll Never Walk Alone," did he?
Um,
Yes, he did. Yes, he did. He did. He sang "You Never Walk Alone." Um, and it getting covered with absolute crap, which is actually coloured yogurt being flung and singing, and it all getting but what I was looking at was this pop idol that I had as a young girl. I thought, oh my God, Jerry and the Pacemakers. He was huge in my life, and watching him, that to me was absolutely glorious. And I hated Matthew for stopping him singing it properly.
that's
Um,
great.
yeah, that was Matt's last day. It was weird. It was weird.
Yeah, I can imagine it was. I can imagine it was indeed. But that it was a great series, and everything has to come to an end at some point, I suppose. But obviously, the show continued. Richard took over. Well, he was hired as the presenter originally. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But it became Sooty Heights after that, and they did keep you not just as Sue, but on screen as well as
Yes, they
Dottie,
did. Yeah,
wasn't it?
yeah, they did.
So he
Yeah.
traded the blonde curly wig to a you had a
Yes,
grey bob
I was a
hairstyle,
bit
didn't you?
posher, wasn't I?
Yes.
I was a bit posher. I didn't quite. The problem was it wasn't. There was no kind of character to it, to Dottie. I mean, whether they wanted her to be Dottie or not, I don't know. But nobody actually said, "Oh, she's this sort of character," and there was nothing in the writing to give me any kind of clue as to what she should be. Um, and don't forget that actually Matt had eased off on the writing for the last three or so series. And lovely, lovely, my dear, dear friend Peter Corey, who's no longer with us, wrote quite a lot. And uh, Freddie Marks wrote some, and various people, because I think, Matt found it, it was an interesting thing to get other people's take on it. Um, but I don't even know, this is awful, but I don't even know who wrote Sooty Heights, who the writers were now. Yes, I think some of them were, because they had the full size set, didn't they, to start with? Actually, it was lovely, that set, I thought. And I think some of those episodes were quite successful, weren't they?
Yeah, yeah, I
The
quite like
early
Sooty
ones.
Heights. Yeah, I like Sooty Heights because that still felt like Sooty and Co. It still
It
had the
did.
same team. The music was still Dave Corbett.
And the director was still the same.
Yeah. And then afterwards it changed to just Sooty, still in a hotel, but it was called Hotel Sooty and they repainted it. But that's when it all went a bit rocky, I suppose. It's the best way to put it. Because of course Richard didn't own the rights at this point, it was a company. And then obviously a couple of years later they did actually change all the cast, didn't they? And you were dropped from the show for a little while, which must have been a
Well,
surprise.
Jack, it was sold and sold and sold. It was owned by the Japanese. It was owned by somebody else. It was owned by Hit. It was owned by it. And basically, they had just bought a piece of fur fabric. They hadn't realised that, because Matthew did all the writing and all the music. Um, and then suddenly, when they bought um, it was a very expensive commodity. And I think what they tried to do, therefore, was to introduce new characters that they could actually make money back on marketing. I know that's one of the ploys that they thought they could make money back by introducing Nicky the cat. Um, but it lost its way, didn't it? Completely, really. Um, uh, and then, of course, the reason they got rid of me was because I was too expensive. And that's what they had to do. That's why they got rid of me, because they had to employ two people.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
and it didn't work. It proved not to work. And also that same year, McDonald's phoned them up and said, "Could we want to sue the panda to do voiceover on this commercial?" And I think they asked Sheila or something, and they said, "Well, that's not Sue. So anyway, in the end, they phoned my agent, and I went off and did McDonald's Happy Meal advert. Not as Sue, but it's Sue's voice, because they said
Yes.
it was the people trusted it. So even in the year that I wasn't doing Sue, I was still doing Sue, if you like.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair enough. But yeah, you
And the
know.
other heartbreaking thing that Matthew went berserk about, I didn't. I just accepted it because I'm a nice person. He went bananas when the cartoon came out,
Oh yes.
and they filmed it while we were filming the television series. So there wasn't any way I could be in two places at the same time. My lovely friend Susie Blake voiced it, the cartoon of Sue, and we went on to do Noises Off at the National together after that. And she shared digs on a national tour, but she's great, Susie. So, but she was, oh, I feel terrible about it. I said, well, it wasn't your fault, but Matthew was very cross about that.
No, fair enough. But
And that didn't take off either, you see. So
no. Yes, I did talk about that with Richard actually, and he said the fact that he inherited the tapes and destroyed them because he hated it so much.
yeah, he hated it, didn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fair enough. I do remember having it on video, but not anymore.
But they brought out incredible amounts of marketing. You've got sooties with dungarees and things, which were in the which no.
I've got one. I've got a McDonald's one at home. I actually
Have
showed it to
you?
Richard when I spoke to him. They've got a
Well,
little
I'm sure
sooty
it's
suite.
very valuable.
It's just been sat collecting dust for about 20 years. I think I cut the tags off them, so probably not, but never mind. I don't keep them for value anyway. It's more for the memories, because I've been a big fan all my life. I mean, obviously there was that rocky period and Sooty came off the air. But of course, Sooty's come back in 2011 after Richard bought the rights back, made it his own. I mean, how did you feel? You must have thought at some point it was never going to come back, but the fact that it did is just incredible.
Well, weirdly enough, actually, Jack, we were Richard had duo pantos. He got this panto company, and he asked me to go and play the Wicked Queen in Skegness, and he was playing the comic in it. And so we were in Skeggy and we're rehearsing, and he said, "Guess what?" He said, "Sooty's up for sale." So I said, "Is it?" And he said, "I'm going to talk to my brother, and we're going to put in an offer for it." I said, "What?" So I was there right at the beginning. I was going, "Yes, yes." He said, and we're going to bring it back. And they did. They put up the amusement park, I think, or they raised the money somehow. He and David, his brother David, and bought it. But he wanted to take it right the way back to how Harry had it, rather than which I quite understand, because that was how he remembered it. They wanted to pare it down to this simplicity, and elbow poor old Scampy. He got the elbow because he served the same purpose as Sooty, really. The kids love Scampy, obviously, because of his little cap and plaster, and but his traits were the same as Sooty's traits, really. There wasn't any differentiation between them. So they got rid of him, except he was naughty, but Sooty was naughty as well. But so then watch this space. I was informed, and then we've got it, he cried. And he very bravely went out and made that Sooty's day out, and took that to ITV and said, "Look, this is what we can do." Because he'd got the location, hadn't he?
Yes.
So that wasn't going to cost him any money. And also, it being that location, he got carpenters, he got circus people, he got all kinds of people that, owed him favours and were all working for him for nothing. I mean, it cost absolutely nothing. Well, it did cost nothing, but it It didn't cost anywhere near what it should have done to make that.
Yeah,
And they were impressed with it.
cool. And to be fair, although I was, outside the target area, I was delighted to see it back. I've watched a few of the episodes, and I think they're great. And what was nice for me is that one of my cousins, who's a lot younger than me, he become a huge fan of Sooty, to the point where he carried a Sooty puppet around with him all the time. And one of the days, I seem to remember doing him copies of all of the older episodes that I'd watched. So I got all these old VHSs out and some DVDs, digitized them all and gave them him to watch. And as far as I'm aware, he enjoyed them. So it's nice that it's gone on to that next generation and another generation, I suppose, since, really, because it's been a while now since it come back. Around about the time that Sooty did come back, or just before that, and it's funny because I realise I've probably spoken to nearly everybody that was on this over the 6 years I've done this. But there was the weakest link with all the puppets, and Sue
Yeah,
won that. That must have
she
been
did.
cool.
It was. Actually, it wasn't cool at all. Do you know the story, Jack, of this?
I've spoken to a lot of people that were the puppets on it, like Ronnie was on it, and a few others. But I don't know the story about why it happened. Just all the individual people have just said to me, "Oh, this is what it was like to be on a puppeteer and try and answer quiz questions at the same
Yeah.
time."
Yeah. No, for me personally, uh, it was disastrous for me personally because clearly the weakest link people hadn't thought out what it would be like to actually film puppets and puppeteers. So those of us who were doing voiceovers were on one side of the studio with our backs to the audience, writing the answers down because we were the ones that spoke. And then somebody would run across the studio and give it to the puppet to sort of mime it, even though you said it.
Hmm.
Anyway, it got down to the last 2, 3, whatever it was. It took so long to film it because they had to keep tape stopping for the walk of shame. They hadn't thought that this puppet, when it goes off, they couldn't get the camera angles right. So it would take many, many takes. The poor audience were in the studio for 4 hours.
Gosh.
And they weren't allowed to go off for a wee or anything like that. And they were really fed up. And as people left, as the puppeteers left, the green room was packed to start with. They went home. And then when I won, I went and did a little interview afterwards. And I went running into the green room. I was starving and I was really looking forward to having a drink and celebrating. It was completely empty. Nothing. Nobody. Everybody gone. And there was a man there said, "There's a car for Miss Longman. I don't know if you know where she is." I said, "That's me." And off I went. And nobody knew. All on my own. No drink, no sandwich, nothing. Because it had taken so long to shoot.
Gosh.
So that was my experience, and I phoned my brother on the car on the way home. He said, "Well, I've just won the weakest link," but it was but Roland Rat was cheating. He was cheating because his wife was under the desk with him, telling him all the answers. So there were 2 people answering, but he didn't win because cheats never prosper.
Very true. Well, actually, that has been the most interesting version of that story I've been told so far. So thank you for that. Because, like I said, I've
Oh,
probably interviewed a few.
terrible. I thought, oh God, I was going from room to there was nobody there at all. At the beginning, that there they all were with their agents and everything, and I just sort of gone on my own. Yeah, it was interesting. Poor old oh God, Stanley from Rainbow. I was helping him out at one time, saying it, giving him the answer because you could cheat as a voiceover person because we were all sitting huddled together. And he said, "What's the answer?" And I'd write it down and hand it over. And then, oh, I'm stopping doing this. This isn't working. I got a bit competitive.
No, that's great. It's great to hear that story, and it was certainly a memorable episode. I remember watching it brand new think it went out on the Christmas that year. Certainly one of my favourite episodes of The Weakest
And,
Link.
and you heard the Anne Robinson thing when she first comes out, because people say, what was she like? And down the corridor, there are lots of photographs of her with each celebrity team that she'd done celebrity shows with, and her face was different in every one, because sometimes it was like that, and in various stages of all the work that she'd had done. And she came out onto the studio floor and she went, "All right, ladies, I know you're dying to see what work I've had done. Now just form an orderly queue. Come on, come down if you want to have a look." And that's what she did. And I thought that was great, actually.
Fair enough. That's a great story.
She's a character.
Certainly, yes. I like that. No, it's great to hear that version of the story because, like I say, I've asked probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 other people that were on that particular episode, and not had that version of the story. So, thank you for that. That's very funny indeed. So of course, your career has, not always been sooty. You've done plenty of things outside of that. I do know that recently you were in Doctors. I mean, what else do you get up to aside from sooty? In terms of acting and stage and TV and stuff like that.
Well, I as I say, I run the theatre company. So stuff that I do with them. But last summer I did summer season at Frinton, and I was Mrs. Higgins in My Fair Lady with wonderful Brian Cox's son. It was an incredible cast, actually. Miles Richardson, super cast. Before that, I was in The Mousetrap in the West End, and we were the first company back after COVID. So we reopened the West End. It was a bit odd doing that because you're walking around the West End and looking at all these shows that haven't gone back. So, it was a very odd thing to do. The reason why the Mousetrap could open was that every single person in it has their own dressing room. So you're actually isolated. But a very odd, the moment you left the dressing room, you had to put a mask on. You had to go and sit down and wait for your cue in the wings, and then take your mask off and go on stage. And it was blocked so that you weren't too near the next person. But many's the time you'd forget you got the mask on, and you'd go on stage, and there was somebody there every night. Pass. Oh, sorry. And then stuff it up my sleeve, and many's the time a mask fell out onto the floor. Yeah. So I was doing that. I'd done a lot of Reverend Mothers in The Sound of Music. I was actually looking back over my career, and I did Sister Margaretta, and in one national tour, which was also at Sadler's Wells. And then the following year, I did another tour where I played Sister Margaretta and Reverend Mother. And then I went off and did Reverend Mother again for Lincoln Theatre Centenary. And then I did Reverend Mother again for Perth Theatre. So a lot of the time, I sort of thought, why am I playing pandas and nuns? Everything I do is black and white. But yeah, quite a lot of musicals. Did Fiddler on the Roof with Topol. I did, but it's mainly theatre. I'd love to do more telly, of course, we all would. And I just pipped getting a nice part in Emmerdale, but you never know, it might come back again. But that's quite, I think what happens is you get about initial 4 or 5 episodes, and then if they like the character, they keep you in, I think. But I don't know, a bit stressful now, I think, doing that.
Yeah.
But yeah, lots of theatre, really. Lots and lots and lots of theatre.
And as I was saying as well, you were in Doctors recently, and what I found funny is your character was a lot like Sue in that she was quite a busybody.
He was. Wasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah, I found that came quite easily to me. It was
Oh,
all coming from a good place, though, Jack.
good, good, good. So it has been lovely chatting about Sooty, but one last thing before we wrap up, and I haven't asked you to do yet, is can you do the voice for me, just to prove that you are Sue?
Well, I could try, but I'm not too sure whether she wanted the strange one or the rather sweet one who whispers like,
That's
"Hello, Jack."
fantastic. That's fantastic. That's brilliant. Well, it's been lovely chatting to you about your time on Sooty and your career, and I've really enjoyed it. It's been something I've wanted to do for a long time, being a Sooty fan, and it's been lovely to meet you in Nottingham and to finally chat as well. It's been fantastic and something I won't forget for a very long time. So appreciate that.
Oh, bless you. Thank you.
What I wanted to ask was, could we say goodbye in a time on the tradition? Can we do
Of
it in that way?
course. It
Okay.
wouldn't be any other way.
Who's going to start? Is it me or
Are you
you?
going to count me in?
Okay, I'll count you in. 3, 2, 1.
Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
A big thank you to Brenda for sharing her memories there, and also thank you for listening. And I'll be back with another edition of the Jack's Throwback Attack podcast, so do look out for that. Until then, from me, Jack, goodbye.